to talk about burnout last week as a failure.
Hang on. Okay, it's Friday night Sangha. Glad to see you guys. Anna, what did you say? You said that we were going to talk about what?
We speak about technology and Dharma, and I really want to talk about burnout as a failure. So, I mean, I would love to continue about complication of technology and somehow, I don't know, is it paradox? Or maybe it's exactly the same thing. I'm not sure.
I didn't catch what you were saying though that we were going to talk about. You say burnout, is that the word you used?
We spoke about technology. If you would like to continue about
No, I asked you a
technology.
question. What did you say that we were going to talk about last week?
Last week
Or did
you said that you will continue to talk about burnout as a feeling of failure in helping professions.
Okay. I think that you're using the word burnout. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. All right. What profession did you mention?
Helping professions. Any helping professions. I'm from therapy field, but I think any medical field gonna fall to the same
Okay.
hole. Yeah.
Um, the helping profession is where it got noticed, but in fact, it happens in all professions, and it also happens in all jobs, basically. You could go so far to say that the guy who gets fired got fired because his employer noticed that he had already gotten burned out. In other words, he became unproductive because he was burned out. And that could have been on the assembly line. That could have been for a guy who changes tires for a living. It doesn't matter what the job itself is. And in fact, I would say that some professions uh, that are not helping professions are actually more prone to burnout than the medical profession, because the medical profession basically is well trained, and where other professions are not. They put the kid to work without 4 years of college and an internship. They just put him to work. And so the medical profession is actually better off, and yet it still has this quality of burnout. So let's discuss what actually is going on there. I could actually answer the question in one sentence, but a simple answer is not understandable. And so let's get into the understanding of it based upon the teachings of the Buddha and the way that it looks like from the ancient days, because in fact they had burnout then. So what we're going to actually introduce today in that sense of burnout is what is referred to in the Pali as the Brahma viharas. Now, the Brahma viharas, the word vihara actually is used very commonly in Sri Lanka to talk about the what. And what the word vihara actually means, uh, heart, and V means in. So in the heart or in the home. And so Brahma Vihara actually means in the home of God. In Christianity in the West, they talk about the kingdom of God, or the Basilica Theos is the word that's used in the Greek. Well, hello, Alex.
Hey,
So
how's it going, guys?
we're we're talking about the Brahma Viharas. Okay, so the Brahma Viharas actually have the quality of having arrived in a really, really good state when we have these things. Um, uh, it means that we live a kind of a sacred life, that the places that we go are holy places, that everything becomes kind of sacred in the sense of the Brahma Viharas, or the home of the gods. Um, that word Vihara, by the way, you can actually hear har in it. That's the Pali language is an Indo-European language, and that makes it a whole lot easier to learn because so many of the words that we use in English actually come from the ancient languages. Victor, I think that your microphone is very noisy right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was muted. Sorry for that.
So, let's go into the Brahma Viharas. There's actually 4 aspects to it. The first one is well known in English by now because Buddhism has kind of seeped into the culture, and that is the word Metta. Metta, Karuna, Mudita, and Upekkha. Now, the word Upekkha is the one that we're shooting for. That's the question about the burnout, is the Upekkha. So let's go in order through those things. And let us use, in today's talk, the example, in fact, that Ajahn Thanissaro uses, and that is a doctor. Now, we all in any profession or non-profession, or even if we're not not working at all, there throughout our existence and our communications with other people is what this is really all about. And the way that the Buddha says is that if we can get the inside of the mind cleaned out and become friends with ourselves and stop hating what's happening to us and start enjoying our moments alone, then once the mind is friendly with it within, we can go out and practice the Brahma Viharas on the outside. Now that would be ideal, let us say, for a monk. But for lay people, we only get maybe a few minutes of practicing metta or practicing friendliness. And then all day long, we've got to practice with all of this big crowd of people who don't know how to be friends with each other. That in fact, at this point, I'd like to mention that in the suttas and in the Wat and in all of the various places and nooks and crannies, there's basically 2 different Buddhisms. One Buddhism is for the beginners, for the children, for the Western adults. We start with that we have to teach what is called the precepts or the morality. Now, every culture has a teaching of precepts and morality. You can think of it as the Sharia law or the 10 Commandments or maybe British common law or whatever. So every culture has a set of rules. And in Buddhism, they start the children with not killing, not taking things that aren't given to you, lying or telling falsehoods, and sexual misconduct, followed up by alcohol. Those are the primary points of the morality within Buddhism. And that we teach this to the children and any new people who come to the Wat. That in fact, almost all of the people come there because basically what we're saying is that without some sort of morality, we can't even have a society. That in fact, the weapons manufacturers couldn't even manufacture weapons because the guys who were manufacturing the weapons would be killing each other with weapons before they got enough of them out. So most people are out there killing with their own bare hands. So that's the whole idea is that humans, in their deep nature, because of their fear, are actually quite violent. Humans harm humans. We hurt each other. And so the very basic teachings of all the religions is don't kill each other. But that's not the actual teaching of the Buddha, but that's the baseline. We have to at least stop killing each other. And then the higher Buddhism is going to be that we're going to now make friends with them, whoever they are, that we don't have enemies, that we have friends, and we see everybody as a friend. So this is the basic of metta, is that we can come to a point of being friends with ourselves on the inside, recognizing the arguments that we have interior in our own minds and say that if I can stop those arguments on the inside, I can stop arguing with people on the outside. Because if I can't stop arguing with people on the outside, in this particular argument, somebody's going to get killed. You know that. Arguments will get worse and worse and worse and worse, and they'll get until somebody wakes up. Now,
but why? You're absolutely right. Why we people want to kill?
They want to kill because they're afraid to be killed. We don't like to be killed, and we see everybody else as dangerous. And so you could say, we could use the word preemptive strike. For instance, the war in Ukraine was because Putin thought that NATO was dangerous. And so he wanted to put a buffer in and other things like this. And so it was out of fear that people attacked.
This person is officially sick. Mr. Putin is psychic. But why you say...
No, Mr. Putin is afraid. Saying that there's something wrong with his mind is like saying something is wrong with every mind of every human being, and I would agree with that. So we can't just go around saying that he's psychic or crazy or something like that. We can look a little deeper into it and recognize it is because he was afraid of fear. The same thing happens in all fights, the street fights. That this new kid comes on the block and all the bullies become afraid. Maybe he's better than us. We got to go prove to him that we're better than he is. That it's always a situation of top dog and underdog. That we all want to be top dog, but we all feel underdog. And so we will attack and kill in order to be on top, to be able to be a winner.
So that's what called ignorance? That's what we call ignorance in the...
Right, exactly so. So we start off very ignorantly, just like dogs are very, very ignorant. And that when dogs are around humans, they gain a lot of knowledge. They actually can cool off. But a wild dog is vicious. We talk about wild in the sense of quite easily becoming violent. And we all are that way. In fact, some societies were labeled as barbaric. You know, barbarism? Actually, that just comes from the Barbary Coast. It was an area of North Africa where, like Somalia these days, it was a bunch of pirates and they had boats. But the whole word point about barbaric or primitive is that primitive tribes carry spears and swords and shields around all day long because it's dangerous all the time. Hundreds of years ago, before guns were invented, everybody carried either a dagger that they concealed or actually walked around with a bigger knife, a big sword, that they couldn't hide, and so they proudly wore it. And this was quite common, that you didn't go out in public unless you were armed. In the United States, they've got almost the same mentality, except now everybody's got a gun. And it comes because we're afraid. There is fear. Now, here's the point. In many, many centuries ago, especially way back when, that people were dangerous. But even before that, before the only tribe that we knew was our local tribe because there weren't very many humans around, at least still the animals were dangerous. Crocodiles were dangerous. Water buffaloes were dangerous. Mammoths were dangerous. So we had to deal with that. So the human being is a kind of a strange animal because it's got an intelligence, but that intelligence is about its only weapon. Bears have great big claws, and alligators have tails and great big teeth, and they can go do stuff. Pythons can squeeze, and cobras have venom, and they can bite. But humans, we've even lost our hair. We can't defend ourselves very well. We don't have great big claws. We've got something that's very fine and delicate, the human finger. It's completely different than a dog's claw, except that it comes from the same biological background. If you'll notice, the dog also has 5. He has 4 that he touches the ground, and then the thumb is up on a little bit higher up. So we're looking at very, very primitive things to where this base fear that comes in. We call this the self-preservation instinct because it is instinctual. It's built right into our DNA that things are dangerous and we've got to protect ourselves, okay? And so we can say then that that DNA, because it comes out of such a deep past, is quite ignorant of the society of today because humans have learned to not be quite so violent with each other. If 2 different wolves from 2 different wolf packs meet each other, they're more than likely one of them's going to kill the other. Humans are not quite so dangerous that 2 guys can meet from 2 different tribes and they may spend 15 or 20 minutes before they kill each other. So this is the baseline is that we are all afraid that we're going to get hurt. And so it's better to attack first. But an offense is a good defense is the natural place that we come from because we do it out of protection. Oh, he might hurt me. I'd better go get him first. Because if I let him hurt me, I won't even have a chance. I'll be dead. So I got to go hurt him first. And that happens in the way that every war starts. World War II got started that way. World War I got started that way. In fact, every conflict gets started from one group of people thinking the other people are dangerous, and therefore we've got to go hurt them. The other possibility would be an intellectual way in the sense of the way that Islam was spread was through the sword. So when they came in to conquer, they gave the guy a choice. You can either join us and become a Muslim, or you're going to die. That's the choice. But at least they gave him a choice. Before that, they would just kill him. So now we're negotiating. And that's the beginning of negotiations for humans, that we negotiate and argue with each other rather than just merely kill each other. And that's the baseline. That's why we have a baseline of morality, is because humans are violent. And they're violent just like every other animal. But we're capable of coming out of our violence, just like a dog that lives with humans is capable of coming out a lot of its violence. That in fact, some dogs are so passive that they won't even defend their own territory anymore, which is the main reason for having a dog. Is because the dog will bark when something happens at night. The intruders know that there's a dog there, and the dog is trained to be vicious and bite. So that's, there it is, because we think that this house can be invaded by invaders. I'm going to have protection. I'm going to have a vicious dog. So when we understand then that this is the baseline for morality, is that at least we can teach people to stop killing each other. At least stop robbing each other. But the higher Buddhism is the Buddhism of not only do we not harm them, we actually help them and benefit. This is called altruism. That part of us is in there as an instinct also. In fact, we can call this the nesting instinct or the motherly instinct. And we all have it. To be able to nurture and take care of one another. We do that in the nest. Every mother nourishes and takes care of her infant child until the child is old enough to argue with mom, and then all of a sudden it's an argumentative relationship rather than a nurturing relationship. So the baseline of the metta is to stop being, first off, at that ordinary level, and then at a higher, more noble level, it's to make friends with people. There was a while for years when the Dalai Lama was kind of famous in the West, there was a bumper sticker that was out, and it says, "My religion is kindness, Dalai Lama." All right? That's what he's pointing at, that his religion is being kind to people, to be generous to people, to be friendly, with people. And this is the whole quality of metta, is to start making friends with the outside world. There are specific practices called metta, and that there's various kinds of them, but the kind that I've learned and I've heard so quite often that they teach in the retreats is when people will sit and take the phrase, "Hello, Scott." Yeah, we're talking about metta right now, and eventually going into the Brahma viharas completely today. So,
Yeah.
with metta, we are learning then to become friends with other people. Now, one could say then that that's the entire teaching of the Buddha. In fact, the Buddha said that himself, being friends on the inside and then being friends with other people on the outside. This is a noble way of living, as opposed to being suspicious and dangerous and argumentative and violent with other people at the first level. And then when there's no level at all, just everybody goes around killing each other, robbing, doing what they want. That everybody becomes a warlord in their own mind. And the only reason that some people are not going to be a warlord is because they're sucking up to some other warlord just to get close enough so that they can kill him. That's why they say that there is no honor among thieves, that they will rat on each other. They will, because everybody's trying ultimately to take care of themselves. And what we're teaching here is to turn those instincts around so that we're not dominated by the self-preservation instinct, and we are dominated by the more wholesome qualities of the nesting instinct. Nurturing, taking care of each other. So this is where the quality of metta is valuable. Because, in fact, if we are hard on ourselves, then we're miserable most of our lives because we keep being hard on ourselves rather than nurturing and friendly to ourselves. And once we learn really how to be nurturing and friendly and accepting of ourselves, because no one's perfect. In fact, at best, you could say that everybody can come up to about 50%, maybe 30%. And we get about 30% of the things right, and we get about 70% of everything wrong. Humans, compared to, let us say, a species that the humans think they are much closer to 80 or 90% successful. The actual human being is about 30% successful, but at least that keeps them alive. And so that ignorance plays in there a great deal for having false positives. We're ignorant, and so we wind up saying, oh, something's wrong here, and in fact, there's nothing wrong. And so we bring our fear to many different places and many different times, and the whole quality of metta is to come out of that so that we can be friendly with others. Okay, so that brings up now the next item on the list. From metta, we move into what is called Karuna. Now, I've actually known people. I've known an Indian woman whose name was Karuna, and so she pretty well knew what it meant. And I learned it from that way. I didn't learn Karuna out of a book. I learned Karuna from someone who I actually knew who had that spiritual name. And what Karuna actually means is not the Western mentality of compassion. But look at the word compassion. It means with passion. So if someone is being in a deal of compassion and they come up onto the porch here, am I supposed to be in that same compassion or have the same passion that they do? This is what they mean by misery loves company. Or if someone is arguing, we'll argue back. We automatically start arguing back. We're using the same defense mechanisms that they are. Another one is that when somebody's really angry, people around them get angry too. Also at a funeral, the whole crowd will wait and wait and wait and not tear up and start bawling as a group until the most important loved one, maybe it was a son or a husband or a wife, and they'll go up and lay on the coffin and start to bawl. And then the whole crowd will start to bawl. This is what funerals are all about. And it takes that trigger, and when somebody important in that funeral starts to cry, everybody tears up and starts to cry. So look at all of these examples that we've got. Anger leads to anger. Arguments lead to arguments. Grief leads to grief. Misery loves company. This is an important point for us to recognize how we affect each other, which means that if we are not going to allow other people to affect us like that, that means that our internal friendship, our own internal metta, must be very strong to resist. So in fact, Karuna is exactly opposite of compassion, and yet it's translated as compassion. So let's get some examples of this. The first example is that I'm on board a very large fishing boat, not a huge freighter or anything. And I've got a friend, and big waves come, and my friend falls overboard. And he's yelling as the boat goes by, "I can't swim, I can't swim." Are you going to jump in the ocean with him? If you do, more than likely you're going to have two people, not one, die, right? But we're wanting to help him. We've got to jump in. My mom, when I was a really little kid, would say, when I said, "Well, why did you do that?" And I'd say, "Well, I was there with Keith and we did it together." And she said, "If Keith stuck his head in the oven, a hot oven, would you stick your head into the oven too?" Guess what? Some people will, because they want to go along to get along. And other people will see the danger in it, and they don't stick their head in the oven. So here we are on this boat, and somebody jumps overboard. Wisdom would say that that we have to do something with the boat itself, and so we have to alert the captain. Wisdom would say that boats have people fall overboard, and they've got plans for that. They've got life rafts, and they've got not just life rafts, but buoys with ropes, life buoys. They've got vests. They've got all kinds of stuff. So one of the things that we could do is to get every life vest that's out there on the rack and throw that into the water. Maybe the guy who fell in would get one of them. Or maybe we can take that life buoy and throw it out there, and then we can pull him in. But jumping into the situation that he's in is unwise. Now, going back to the doctor actually starts to perform medicine from that position of metta. He has friendliness, and he has what in English we would call compassion. He wants to help people. He goes through medical school, he gets his degrees, and he's practicing medicine because he wants to help people, altruistic. But quite often, and this happened a lot in the first time that COVID came, is that when people were going to the hospital with COVID, all the nurses were getting sick with COVID. All the orderlies, the whole hospital, anybody in that hospital that had a COVID patient, now everybody's got it. This is the exact point about the doctors. Have to not catch the disease that they're dealing with. Doesn't that sound correct? The doctors should not catch the disease that their patients have, because that's going to make two people sick. And yet that's the way that we normally do stuff. And so doctors are trained specifically to take care. And so when the nurses and all of them understood what coronavirus was, then not only did not so many people in the hospital get sick, but the patients who had gotten sick, so not so many of them died. They figured out that putting people on ventilators was a death sentence to help them breathe. They thought that they were helping them, and they were killing them instead. And so when they stopped using the respirator, you remember about how important we don't have enough respirators and all of that kind of stuff. And then they found out that respirators were keeping people alive maybe 20 days, but there were better things that they could do than giving them respirators. And one of the most important things was the posture. You see, with that respirator, they would crank up the bed so that they were in a semi-sitting posture, and that made it difficult to breathe naturally. And so when they rolled down the bed to a flat surface and allowed the patients to lay on their sides, not so many of them died. But this point is the point about Karuna, which means that we have to very well, just like in our own life, when we begin to be friendly with ourselves, we had to clean out some of the garbage. So that means then that when in Karuna, when we're dealing with people, we have to be able to deal with them without catching their disease. And yet we can still help them by remaining friendly, which then gives us into the next one, which is Mudita, which is referred to as sympathetic joy. Now, sympathetic joy in an ordinary way means that I can go find my joy wherever I can. If I have a joyful friend, let me go spend some time with him. Another example, which is quite clear on this level, is let us say that two people are competing for the job of becoming the manager, that their manager has just gotten promoted, and they have decided and told everybody that they're going to promote from within. And two guys really want that new manager's job. And one of them gets it, and the other one didn't. So let's talk about the guy who didn't get it. If he didn't get it and his workmate got the job, that means that his workmate is now becoming his boss. Here comes natural jealousy and argumentation. I should have gotten that job. I'm better at doing that than you are, etc., like this. That in fact, if we have jealousy, we're setting ourselves up to get fired, because we're making ourselves an enemy right away of our new boss. The other way of thinking about it, and we have to have some mindfulness to do that, is to say, oh, I should make friends with this guy. In fact, I should pay for supper and a celebration and take the whole crowd out to show them how pleased I am that this new guy got the job, so that I can help bring the group together in cohesion. And I become friends with my new boss. And then my life and my everything is secure and easy. But if I'm jealous, I'm ruining the situation by my own attitude. So that's the normal way of looking at, oh, I should be happy that this guy got the job. If I can be happy that he got the job, then I don't have to go around too much remorsing over the fact that I didn't. I can get some of his juice, some of his joy. So at that celebration party, I can really celebrate. I'm paying for it, and I can do it. So this is one way of looking at Mudita, is to be able to gain our joy through other people's success, even that we didn't get it ourselves. And the normal position would be jealousy. But now let's take Mudita and turn it around into a more noble position. And the nobility of the Mudita is that you have the joy already, and that you're going to vibrate your joy so that that sympathetic vibration helps others. So when someone is in misery, instead of being in compassion with them and jump in and commiserate with them, we can in fact pull them out through our joy. This is in the medicine is what we would call bedside manner for the doctor. And often the bedside manner is more important than the actual medicine that he gives them or the procedures that he performs. It's his attitude and way of dealing with them. If the doctor says, oh, you're going to die, then people feel bad. If he says, hey, man, you're going to make it through with this illness is easily curable, and we're going to fix you right up. This is the kind of attitude that the doctors actually train for, is to have a good bedside manner. So Anna, go ahead. You had your hand up.
I'm still stuck with Karuna. Is it must to be linear? So before we get to Mudita, do we need to understand Karuna or any other time? I'm just still don't get what is Karuna. I mean, I still not understand what it is opposite to compassion. Should I understand it now? I just can let it go and I will understand it later.
Well, let's go back and sum up to what I was saying about that is that it does not make any good benefit for the doctor to get sick with his patient, that the patient comes in for the doctor's treatment and the patient makes the doctor sick.
So it's not an empathy then. Well, it's not an empathy. So it kind of supposed to be protected empathy.
Okay, empathy would be something like, I feel sorry for you.
No, this is sympathy. Empathy is say, I feel like you. And then I feel like you and I get sick because I feel like you.
Right, okay. So that's normal compassion. Empathy is kind of halfway in between, in the sense that we empathize with people, but we're not really going to do much of anything about it. So, it may be, and in fact, if the empathy is a positive attitude, then that's different than empathy with a negative attitude, because empathy with a negative attitude is much more like compassion, getting stuck in it with them. Okay, so empathy then would be the nurses trying to figure out how they get sick so that they don't get sick when people come in with COVID. That's where all the masks came in. So you could say that empathy then is wearing a mask. Compassion is getting sick. Go ahead.
Is it Karuna? So this wearing mask is gonna be the what is yes? So yes.
Yeah, empathy
wise empathy. I would say yes.
Right. Okay.
Wise empathy is wear mask.
Right. Okay. So that's why I haven't used the word empathy, is because it's all over the place. It's just like the word love. It's all over the place. There's many different uses of the word empathy also. So we can empathize correctly or we can empathize incorrectly. And if we're empathizing correctly, that means then that we're not about to get stuck with their problem.
But I still feel it's
psychologists do that. Psychologists do that a lot. The psychologist will have the patient come in and complain for an hour, and it's hard for the psychologist to not get caught in it, that they will start arguing with their client. They'll start commiserating with them, okay? So let us say that the psychologist became a psychologist because of his empathy, but he wound up in compassion.
But so we still kind of in metta. I don't get the difference then. I just I cannot understand the difference. What between metta because it's like we kind of growing, make metta bigger. We like ourselves and we are like our neighbors, blah, blah, blah. So what is this then?
All of it has to do with, can you get your own mind straightened out and then keep it straight while you're dealing with others? And if you can keep your own mind straight in dealing with others, then we're practicing the Brahma viharas, because we're doing it from a mind that is pure. So that's the important point, that most of the people in the world who practice empathy and compassion wind up in bad feelings. And if they wind up in bad feelings, then the person that gave them the bad feelings they won the argument. Because when that guy comes in and says, I'm so angry at the bank, and we become angry at the bank too, because we've heard what he said and we know what the banks are like, and so we get angry with him. Then when we're both angry, how can I now practice mudita and bring him out of his anger. Can't do it.
There's also this subtle pressure, right? Like to feel bad, like with other people, otherwise you're not really a good person. So that there's also a cultural factor that complicates that. They're just not getting affected by things.
Well, that culture actually is instinctual. It's instinctual for us to commiserate with other people, to have compassion for them, to have empathy for them, which is kind of different than having a view of altruism, because altruism is the process of doing something about it. For empathy, the example of that is the beggar is asking for money on the street. One guy comes by and says, "Oh, these beggars, they just get too much money, and why don't they go get a job?" And then the next lady comes by, and she gives him a dime and walks off. All right, that's the compassion. She's trying to get rid of her bad feelings that she has by seeing this guy, and so she gives him a little bit of money to absolve her of her bad feelings, and she walks off. The next person who comes up to the beggar says, "Oh, here's $1." And then the next day he comes by and he goes down to the shop, this is in New York, spends $5 for a donut and a bagel. And so we keep giving this guy something and giving that guy something, and pretty soon his life changes, because now for the first time this beggar has a friend who cares about him. This is the mudita, is that I've got plenty enough. This is the story about Willie, in fact. This is very interesting. I won't use more than that. But Willie, we started practicing that generosity in the sense that he would get a bag full of quarters, and he would, in New York City, get out of his apartment, take the subway, and get to his job. And in the process, he would see a number of beggars. And so he started giving each one of them a quarter. That changed to being $1. And his whole life in New York City changed, as well as the fact that he learned some of these people, and those who he could see that really needed his help, he would actually go and buy food for them and bring it to them. Okay, this is mudita. This is sympathetic joy. I have something of value. Let me give it to you. This is also what we mean by the bedside manner of the doctors, is that they can cure their patients through their kindness, through their generosity, through their caring. This is mudita. And the way that we can handle that is by having a smile for everyone, to be friendly with everyone, rather than going with the compassion, with the empathy, with the old way of doing it, giving the guy a dime and walking off. We actually help them. Now, we've come to the fourth point, which is the question that you originally asked. And that is, with this, the doctors, no matter how good their bedside manner is, no matter how they're proficient in not getting ill from their patients, they don't catch what the doctor had, or excuse me, the other way around. But still, the doctor is going to lose patients. They're going to die. Every doctor has every patient, and every patient that the doctor has is going to die. If the doctor, with his bedside manner, thinks that he can, in fact, save people just because he's got a fat lip, and then the guy dies, then the doctor feels bad because he felt responsible for that gift that he gave. Social workers are like that. That in fact, social workers are one of the group that are most susceptible to burnout. And the reason for that is because you've got this family that's busted up. They've had so many troubles all of these years, and now the government has gotten involved with them because of money or taking the kids away or something like that. And now the social worker's job is to straighten out that mess. And those kind of messes are really hard to straighten out. And so most of them, even for very good social workers, they don't get straightened out very well. And because of that, the social worker feels bad. They feel incomplete. They feel inadequate. I was dealing with that patient, the doctor says, and I thought that he was in remission, and then he croaked. I must have been doing something wrong. This is what we're meaning by the word Upekkha, that fourth item, that things are going to happen. Bad things are going to happen. The shit is going to hit the fan. It's going to happen. Are we ready for it? Can we keep our joy? Can we keep our friendship, even in the face of disaster? So in public, that would mean then that you've got kind of a workmate, and he argues with you on every point. You're not going to be able to stop him from arguing. No one can help anyone else in this way. This is why psychotherapy is so ineffective and inefficient, is because everybody expects the psychotherapist to do something about the client. And in fact, only the client can fix the client. And if the client figures out that this psychotherapist will help me figure out how to help myself, then the guy can get some help. But if they just sit around and hoping, then there's nothing going to happen. And the psychologists get burned out because they can't help people, because the people really won't help themselves. And the same thing is true with the doctor. The doctor is going to have his patients die on him no matter how effective his medical practice was. He's still going to lose every patient he's got, unless he dies first or loses them to another doctor, which then that doctor is going to watch him die. That's just how it is. The real question is, can I keep my cool while I'm dealing with all of this death and destruction? The death for the doctor and the destruction for the social workers. Guess what? Teachers get burned out too. An example of that would be the teacher has finally a star student. For the first time in her career, she's had a kid that's brilliant. And just like the other teachers that have been working with this kid, we want to promote him and get him into a good school or to get him into university or something like that. And the kid flunks the entrance exam. And look at how the teacher feels now. I had also a similar situation with a full commander in the United States Navy. And he worked very hard to get me into the ROTC program at the university. And those, even though he outranked them in the Navy, they still would not let me into the ROTC program. You know why? Because I was fat. And there was nothing much to do about that. But this commander, actually, he was a mentor for me. His name was Milton McDonald. He's been dead for years. But Commander McDonald actually got me a girdle to put on in the interview. I mean, that's how much he cared. But when I got washed out, when they wouldn't accept me, it really hurt our relationship. He felt really, really badly that he could not get me into the ROTC program, which is a program at the university for men to become officers. So that's just another example. It happens in many, many places, to where we want to help somebody, we want to get something done for them, and it falls on its face. And when it does, are we going to feel bad? And also that happens with us. In fact, this whole point then is that for beginning meditators, and they go and take a Goenka retreat, and Goenka says, when the mind wanders away from the breath, never mind, start again. Which means he's saying, have some Metta, Karuna, Mudita, and Upekkha for yourself. But instead, no, we wash out. We can't do it. That Upekkha was not there when the mind wandered away. Now we're going to fuss at ourselves. We're going to be critical of ourselves. We're going to say, oh, monkey mind. Oh, I can't do this. Oh, meditation is really hard. And the real answer to that is, never mind, start again. So even with the doctor who has just lost a patient that he's had for years, and the patient dies, maybe even the doctor goes to his funeral. What the doctor needs to say to himself the next morning after the funeral is, never mind, I lost a patient, never mind, let's start again. But we don't. And that's where the burnout comes, is because we don't have that never mind, start again kind of mentality. We can't pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and boogie on down the road. That disaster kept us laying in the ditch. The social workers, they want to quit their jobs because they don't feel effective at it. Well, a social worker's job is not to be effective. The social worker's job is to prevent even more damage from happening, but they're not going to improve things. And so there's no reason for the social worker to get burned out. But the same thing, burnout, can happen with an automobile mechanic who keeps having the same few cars come back and come back and come back because he didn't fix it the first time. And he can get burned out with that. Oh, I can, and not only that, but I think everybody in town wants that guy to quit that job because they want their cars fixed, and he can't do it. So that would be also when we're not good at or not effective at our jobs, we'll become burned out with them. And people can get burned out on any job when they become dissatisfied with it and they're not aware of their dissatisfactions and be able to set their satisfactions back straight again. And so we have an entire society that's going around grumbling because they're not getting their way and they don't have real control over their minds. But when we are able to practice over and over again to take the unwholesome, unhappy, miserable states of mind that we get into and remember to change that, to put on a happy face, to take the unwholesome thoughts and throw them out. And generally, most thoughts are unwholesome. That's why we have such an unwholesome life, is because our thoughts are unwholesome. Let's have a wholesome thought. Let's have a wholesome thought when we're alone. Let's have one wholesome thought after another when we're alone and make friends with ourselves and accept all of ourselves, warts and all. Yeah, we've been a screw up. I have screwed up so many times, but I learned from a lot of it. And so we learn to accept our past. It's okay, I screwed up. I don't want you to know how bad I screwed up, but I can accept that I screwed up. And so we learn to love ourselves, to respect ourselves, to have nurturing for ourselves. Then we can use those skills that we've just developed for ourselves on the inside and apply them to the outside. But do not expect to be able to practice this on the outside without already having a strong foundation of it on the inside. Why? Because we are prone to jump right in the lake, put our head right back in the stove. When they're angry, I get angry. When they argue, I'll argue right back. So that's the way that we live our lives without the Brahma viharas, but we can get the Brahma viharas once we get our own mind straightened out, and then we can go out in the world, and no matter how bad things go, I can still keep my mind straight. This is the Brahma viharas, when we live in a holy place, and it doesn't matter how much bad things happen, I'm okay, because I can't change it. The doctor can't stop the guy from dying. He has to accept it. And if he's really lucky, accept it happily. And if he can accept it, then he can continue being a doctor. And a lot of doctors are actually able to lose one patient after another, and they still keep coming back and practicing medicine. Yes, Alex.
Yeah, hey, Dhammarato. Oh, God. My mind just went blank. I had a question to ask you. What were you talking about again?
We were talking about this time
Upekkha. I remember.
Yeah, being able to handle other problems that come.
The Brahma viharas.
Yeah, the Brahma viharas.
Okay. I had a question about that. During the Brahma viharas, is there any sense of effort, or is it just kind of? It's
yes.
Kind of like.
Yes, there is an effort to it, but the effort, the real effort, happened before the guy came to the door.
Right. Okay.
The real effort is to get our own mind cleaned out so that we're not arguing with ourselves, that we come to a state of unity, that we come to a state of happiness, that we come to a state of nurturing and friendliness to ourselves, and accept it, and everything is okay right here, right now, while I'm alone. And I keep practicing that over and over and over again till it becomes real, that I cannot cause myself any more problems because I'll catch it. Once we have our own mind completely cleaned out, then we can go out and practice metta correctly. But you see, we don't have that chance. In the West, we practice a little bit of metta, and then we go out and we get all messed up with the Brahma viharas when we're dealing with other people because we don't have the skills yet. Well, never mind. Start again. Let's go back and rehash that and say, I could have not had that argument. I could have stopped it immediately. I could have shut my mouth. I could have given him a smile instead of my lip. Okay, and so that's the way that we begin to practice, so that we could say, well, I can practice that. I can handle somebody's arguments later better because now I know what to look for. And so we begin to get our own mind straightened out, so that we have to go back and forth between being alone and being in a really good state with having to deal with other people. Back and forth, alone people. We don't really take the time to be alone long enough to really clean things out. That in fact, here's a really funny example of this, is that there, in Tibet, they have a system to where the guys go off and are put in a mountain cave-like apartment for about 3 years. The only people, they don't even see anybody. The only people they have any contact with is the people who put the food, bring it around to them, and then take away the dirty dishes and whatnot. It's kind of like a prison. But the whole point of getting into that kind of seclusion is to get the mind cleaned out. And so the story is that this Westerner had done that. And then at the end of the 3 years, his master called him and says, come back here. And they drove the car up there and picked him up to give him a ride back to the where the main monastery was. And he couldn't handle that car. He had not gotten his mind cleaned out at all. He liked the peace and the quiet of his hermitage, but he didn't have his mind cleaned out enough that he didn't have to get into bad feelings about being in a car. He actually asked the people to stop the car, and he got out and walked back to his place. That he didn't get out of that 3 years alone in seclusion that joy that he can handle anything. Because if he had, then he'd been there with a kind of joy and excitement. Wow, this car bouncing around is a very interesting experience. I bet I can handle this too. If I can handle sitting on my butt for 3 years, I bet I can handle sitting in this car for 30 minutes. But he didn't have those kind of thoughts. So it's really important for us to recognize that we are going to have to deal with reality out there while we're not ready to deal with it. But at least we're getting ready. Because most people out there are not able to deal with society, and they're doing nothing about it to get ready for it. This is why we have so much trouble. If everybody out there was in the Dhamma and trying to practice together, then that would be a noble Sangha, because they're out there actually trying to help each other. But most of the time, in fact, almost all of the time, the people are out there protecting themselves from you. But they don't see you as a friend, because you don't see them as a friend. But we can change that by learning to be good friends. Now we can be good friends with them out there, but there's going to be some of them that are going to hate you, whatever kind of friend you are. That's for the doctor, that's the dying of the patient, that I could not get through to that guy. That's Upekkha. And we have to deal with the fact that some people don't get to Dhamma. We have to deal with the fact that the patients die, that the psychologist client doesn't improve, that the social worker cannot help this lady and her kids. This is the way that we have to recognize that we're okay and the world has to deal with itself. And when we can deal with ourselves and keep our own mind completely pure, all throughout the practice of Metta, the practice of Karuna, the practice of Mudita. In fact, practicing Mudita is very, very good to help us be more successful so we don't have to deal with the Upekkha. And another way of thinking about Upekkha is like the floor that we're standing on is not stable. That we'd like to have some stability. We would like things to be the way that they were, that they don't change. But the fact is that the floor under us is not stable. The computer programs change. The automobiles get more complicated. That life gets more sophisticated. And we don't like that because we want to have stability. But Upekkha is actually a skill to be developed so that we can handle all the vagrancies and the vicissitudes of life. The slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, including improvements in technology, don't affect us. They don't hit us. That we can stand out of the way. We can play dodgeball with that kind of stuff and not be affected by it if we have our mind together, so that we don't have to deal with other people's problems by having their problems. That we can deal with other people's problems happily by letting them keep their problems, that their problems don't come back in. So this is the whole practice then. So now we've got them all together, and it looks like kind of a package deal that no matter what happens, we're going to be in good state because we practiced it. And that's why it's called the home of the gods, or the home of the Brahmins, the home of the, we live in a palace. We live in a paradise, while other people live in groveling in a hovel in their minds. Now, there's some technical things that we could go into, like what's the difference between a metta practice and a practice of anapanasati, of gladdening the mind? The answer to that is that, well, metta actually, when it's practiced correctly, is anapanasati, because the metta is having wholesome thoughts about people. An unwholesome thought would be about, I've had too many arguments with that guy and I just don't like it and I don't think we can get along together. Versus, hey, I really like that guy. He's a good friend of mine. Those would be wholesome thoughts. I can deal with him. That would be a wholesome thought. That would be the metta. So when we say, may all beings be happy, what we're really saying is, may all the beings who I just had an argument with be happy. And that makes it a little closer to home. So, Anna, do you have now any more questions? Anybody have any questions about what we're talking about?
It is very interesting. When you're talking about it, it's possible. But when you get back to the practice, it's kind of becoming impossible.
Well, it's impossible right now. Here's the point. When you say it's impossible right now. Let's go back and practice some more and then come back. Never mind, start again. Yes, we have to accept the fact that we failed. Can we fail and still keep a bright smile? Yeah, it was impossible. That guy I could not help, but I'm okay anyway, and I can continue to be happy with him, even if he's miserable.
But that's how burnout usually look, because one thing it's a healthy equanimity which you presenting, and that's why I feel, and then another thing it's I just don't care, and that's what burnout is. I do not care. It's
Good. That's a really, really
it's
good place to
equanimity,
be.
but it's not.
That's a very good place to be. Because if you do care, then you jump into the river with them. If you do care, you'll stick your head in the fire because they did. So it's better to not care. But in fact, that's the whole teaching of the Buddha is that everything really is okay and I'm friendly with everything and I don't care what the problems are. I just don't care. Just don't care. That's a really great place to be. But many people will say, I don't care, and they're miserable. Can you say, I don't care and love it? Can you say, I don't care and be very happy that you are free from it and you don't care?
So many people saying, I don't care, and they're miserable. So what exactly stands on the way?
Pardon?
Why people saying, I don't care and stay miserable? What stands on the way to be happy?
Because they're lying. They do care. Because they are lying, they do care. And then they're miserable. If they really didn't care, then they could zippity-doo-dah right down the road. They care.
So what is it care means? It means that we have some memories which we cannot clear up? What is it?
Well, care means carrying. When you care for something, you're carrying it mentally. And the longer we carry something, the heavier it gets. And the best thing to do is to set it down and to not care anymore. No matter what it is that we care about, it gets heavy from time to time. And so we should set it down. If a computer scientist is building a program and he really cares and he's working and now he's tired and he needs to leave the computer, he says, right now I don't care, I'm going to go to sleep. And so he stops caring about his program and he goes to sleep. If he does continue to care about the program, he might in fact go lay in the bed and continue to care about the program. And he's not sleeping, he's not resting, he still cares about it. He's just not caring about it in front of the computer. He's carried it to bed with him. And people do that not just with their computer programs, they do that with their broken automobiles, their broken relationships, everything that they're trying to fix, they'll carry it around with them instead of just setting it down. Now, the burnout is when you set it down with great disgust rather than great joy. Oh, I can just go take a rest right now. I don't have to work all the time. I can just take a rest. And 5 minutes later, I'm back at work, and 3 minutes after that, oh, I need another rest, and I go rest for 5 minutes. So about 5 minutes on and 5 minutes off and 3 minutes on is a good way of living one's life. Rather than I gotta care. Why not I just stop caring about it? Take a rest. Take a load off. Put it down. It's heavy. Why is it heavy? Because we're carrying it. And anything that we carry a long time is going to get heavy. Shall I do my coffee cup thing? All right. Here, how heavy is this coffee cup? It's about half full of coffee. How heavy is it? Keyshawn, how heavy is this cup? A lot of people think that I'm asking the question, how much does it weigh? And so they'll say, well, maybe 500 grams, something like that. But I'm not asking the question of how much it weighs. I'm asking the question of how heavy it is.
Not very heavy. Yeah.
Well, guess what, Alex? This cup is getting heavier. The longer I hold it, the heavier it gets. In fact, my arm's getting tired from holding it. All right? So
Yes.
if we're carrying a mental thing around, we need to set it down and stop carrying it, to stop caring about it. And so I'm going to set the cup down now. Ah, my right arm feels so much better now. Oh, what a relief it is to having set that cup down. You can imagine that some things we carry around for weeks and months. We can't get it off our mind, and we make ourselves miserable by carrying way too much. I've got an unsolvable problem. Then we can try to solve it again and again and again. And the reality is that there are no problems. You can set anything that's heavy, set it down. Get away from it.
So what stuff like that's what happening with this with the helping people, but they somehow dry out. Instead of be happy, they get very empty and dry. What
Yeah.
exactly broken? In what point? I mean, they're not gonna. They already practice metta in their jobs, but instead of helping them to develop, instead they dry out and get angrier.
Mm-hmm.
What are
That's
the
because they
is
care.
the
That's the
parts?
whole point, is because they care. They get dried out because their clients become too heavy. The psychologist who can't help somebody, the psychologist will think about them in a way of working. Well, what can I do here, and does that work? And maybe I can tell them this and that kind of thing. But if the psychologist has a client that is happy and waltzes into the psychologist's office and loves to talk with the psychologist, and both of them really enjoy the conversation, then when that client leaves, then the therapist is going to have happy thoughts about that person, lightweight thoughts. They're not going to have heavy thoughts about them because they're broken. He's going to have lighthearted thoughts because they're successful. Okay. And so one of the things that we really want to develop within our practice is the feeling of satisfaction and success, so that I can feel successful even though the client is not gaining any distance. I did what I did. I gave him as much joy as I could give him, and he still didn't get any joy, but I still got plenty of joy left. I didn't give it all away. It wasn't burned away. I didn't waste my joy because I got plenty of it. I'm wealthy with joy. And so it's okay that some clients are not getting anything out of their psychotherapy. Just like some patients are not going to respond to the medical treatment, they're going to die. The question is, can the doctor be happy that he knows how to practice medicine? A lot of doctors, when a patient will die, they'll start questioning, oh, am I a bad doctor or what? Oh, I screwed that up. Oh, I'm terrible. Oh, I hope the American Medical Association doesn't catch me because I really screwed that up. Oh, I hope the nurses weren't watching. This is the kind of thoughts that a bad doctor will have, and that will cause burnout. But if the doctor can say, oh, that patient died, I did my best, but people die, and I'm still a good doctor. Let me go help somebody who's still alive. Okay, so it's a mental attitude, and that attitude is the attitude of being successful. Even in the face of absolute failure, we still have the attitude of successful. But instead of, yes, go ahead, Keyshawn.
I was going to ask, how does the Brahma viharas map onto or connect with the pacing, part of the pacing and leading?
Ah, okay. That in fact, one of the places that we can use the pacing and leading is in that level of Karuna, to where we actually show the person that we are in it with them in order to lead them out. But if the psychotherapist actually goes in there with them, then neither one of them can get out. But we have to get close. This is the example with the lifeline, that we can throw somebody a lifeline and then pull them back in onto the boat with the rope, as opposed to jumping in with them. Or maybe the worst occasion is that they've got the life raft, the life buoy, and we've got the other end of the rope, and we're pulling them on board. But somehow or another, because they're big or they hit a wave or something like that, that we're holding that rope so tight to pull them in that now the rope itself pulls us overboard. And that's a really clear example for a psychotherapist, that here they are pulling somebody in and all of a sudden, whoop, and they're right into the drink with them. Never mind, start again. There's the attitude. Yeah, I screwed that up, but I'm okay. And so this is a way that we can handle Upekkha in our own private practice, is by learning to be okay with our own failures. That, yeah, our own patients die. My moments die. Sometimes I have such a bad thought that I actually kill the moment. I get bored. I don't like it right now. I want it to be different. And all my joy is gone. Until I say, wait a minute, I don't have to do that. I'm the boss here. I can throw those bad feelings and thoughts out, and I'm back. Never mind, start again. Okay, so the Brahma viharas actually are something that we can practice on the inside of the mind before we deal with other people. But the main point of the Brahma viharas is learning to deal with other people while you've got your own mind cleaned out. So, even if they're miserable, even if they don't want to laugh at my jokes, even if they get pissed off, I can still be joyful if I've got the skill to do that. And it is a skill that, in fact, is sometimes a useful thing to do. Just like in a gym, when a person starts, they start with the very, very small weights. And they do the reps, 1 kilogram dumbbell over and over and over and over and over again. We do the reps with the small thing rather than picking up 50 pounds one time. That doing one pound 50 times is better than 50 pounds one time. That's the way that we practice over and over and over again. But sometimes, all of a sudden, we've got to pick up that 50-pound load. Can we? Sometimes the psychologist has a patient they can't help. Are you going to be okay with that anyway? Sometimes the beginner who can only do many, many reps of 1 kilogram, all of a sudden now, he's got a 500 or maybe a 5,000-pound car to pick up. Can't do it. Unless he has to. Like maybe his son is caught under that car. Maybe then he can lift it. But those are extraordinary circumstances. Normally, we can only lift the loads that we're capable of lifting. And so we need to practice and gain the strength. What is that? The strength of mind. What kind of strength? The strength to be happy no matter how heavy things get. Because we can, in fact, set them back down. So the psychologist can stop thinking about her clients. The doctor can stop thinking about the patients that died. The ordinary people can stop thinking about the arguments that they just had. Just stop with our own misery and brighten our mind, accept us, and come back to that state of joyful friendliness with ourselves. And if two people can do that, then they can get along beautifully. If one person can do that and the other one is still caught in argumentation, we can still deal with that, but it's not as easy to deal with. But we can still deal with it. But under most circumstances, people can't deal with it, and so they just start arguing with each other. And when that happens, one of them or the both of them should say, wait a minute, argument happening. Never mind, start again. Let me take a deep breath and shut my mouth and stop arguing. So this is the way that we practice. That's Upekkha. The Upekkha is to shut your mouth, to stop, to come back to a rest, to stop banging ourselves all over the place. Here's an example of that. One of the interesting ones is that the captain of the big fishing boat has been on that fishing boat for years, and he's been out in storms. He's been all over the place, and he's got what they call in the Navy sea legs. And then he's got some professor who comes on the boat to do some research, and he takes him out, and in the rough water, they're sitting there at the bow, and the captain sees that he needs to go to the stern. So he gets up and he walks to the stern. And the college professor, what they call a landlubber, he goes back to the stern too, except he can't get back to the stern. He falls on the ground, he falls on the deck, he falls onto the cabin, he grabs this rope and swings around. He either heaves over the side or goes over the side. Why? Because he doesn't have his sea legs in the position that that boat is not stable. So sea legs for Navy people, that's a skill to be developed. That in fact, one of the ships that I was on was a training ship, training vessel. It was United States English. And one of the things that the old salts really loved was to see these guys that had just gotten out of boot camp and coming on for their first training, to watch them manage themselves on that tin can to get their sea legs. Because everybody has trouble. That's why they want to have great big liners for people to go take vacation, is because they want to have a really big ship that can handle the big waves and still maintain some stability. That's why cruise ships are really big. You would not have a cruise ship the size of a destroyer. You would want a cruise ship the size of an aircraft carrier. Aircraft carriers are very stable. Otherwise, it would be impossible to land an aircraft on them. So this whole idea of stability comes from within our mind, because the floor is out from is moving. Now, if we say, I have to have the floor to be stable, then we're going to be doing a lot of suffering, because times are changing. This is the major teaching of the Buddha in the sense of anicca. The floor you're standing on is not stable. Nothing is stable. Everything is in movement. And all of that, those people that we have to deal with out there, they're also unstable. The only place that we're going to find stability is within our own mind. And that stability is strength that we have of knowing that we're successful. What are we successful at? Coming out of bad feelings and getting into good feelings. Over and over and over again, we practice to start to feel good. And when we are able to practice that, then we can maintain it almost all the time. But then sometimes we fall down. Sometimes this is too big of a wave. Never mind. Never mind. Start again. Pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, boogie on down the road. Because we're going to keep falling down and keep falling down. The question is, do you have the skill to pick yourself up, dust yourself off happily, and boogie on down the road? Or when we fail, are we going to be miserable about it? Because we were miserable about it from childhood. That was the ignorance. Very few children ever are taught or can figure out that making a mistake is a learning opportunity rather than a punishment opportunity. That we live in a punishment culture. If you screw up, you're going to have to pay for it. We're changing that into the mentality that when you screw up, hey, look at what you're doing. Never mind, start again. Learn. Or another way of saying it is rehabilitation is what the Buddha teaches, not punishment for wrongdoing. Therefore, we should be very happy to see when we've screwed up. Why? Because it's a learning opportunity. Wow, I'm glad I saw that. Even though it was a stupid thing to do, I'm glad I saw doing it, rather than saying, oh, I wish I hadn't done it, and I feel bad because I did do it. We can be happy that, yeah, we screwed up. Look at that. I can see that. I acknowledge that I screwed up. And when we acknowledge that we're screwing up, then we can be happy with that. That's the Upekkha. The screwing up was the fact that we set our own deck awash. And so now we can say, I can find that stability in mind. I do not have to be bowled over by my own mistakes. I can accept them happily. With that kind of attitude, we don't screw up so much. If we are in denial about our screw-ups, we wind up screwing up a lot. And we avoid seeing our screw-ups because we're afraid of getting punished.
But we're all in denial because this is how our development was, because we were taught not to be happy, that we're all in denial and we don't see it.
Right, but we can change that. We can have the attitude, I can see my own foibles. I can see my own problems. I can love myself for them. I don't have to hate myself or to be ashamed or embarrassed or afraid. I can be happy when I screw up. Ah, look at that. I was a real doodle there. That's the way to look at it. In fact, that recently happened just a couple of days ago. My 10-year-old daughter, Kitty, was putting a plate of food on the desk here, but the desk was crowded with a flashlight and the bottle of this and a couple of cups and things like that. And instead of steadying the plate, she set it there so that she could move the other stuff, and it immediately fell onto the floor because there wasn't enough room. And all the heavy stuff was on the downside. Well, see, as an engineer, I know that. A 10-year-old, she doesn't know that. And so I carefully pointed out that, when you put your plate down that is half laying over the side, at least spin the plate around so that the heaviest stuff is that which is on the table. If you put the heaviest stuff in the air, of course it's going to fall down. Okay? And so that was a learning opportunity. But many daddies, when their 10-year-old comes and that kind of stuff happens, they'll say, look at what you're doing. Watch what you're doing. You ought to not do that. Blah, 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 blah. Why don't you? Blah, blah. And the child picks that mentality up. And so later, they do that again to themselves. Why did you screw up like that? Why don't you watch what you're doing? And we're really hard on themselves because daddy was hard on us. That's our habit. But we can change habits one thought at a time. We can wake up just when that plate's about to fall and catch it. Or we can wake up even though it does fall. We can say, never mind. That's okay. We can pick that up. We can clean up. We can clean up happily. We don't have to feel bad because the plate fell on the floor. But that takes a training. And the right time to train is just at the time when the plate falls, if we can remember. Now's the time to practice. Now is the time to practice. It's just at the point of the screw up. Never mind, I can handle that. Yeah, I screwed up, so what? I've screwed up before, I'll screw up again. Can I be happy when I screw up? That's Upekkha.
So if it's not happening immediately, so I'm much better in it, but usually it takes me to let go for a day approximately. So during the
a lot
day,
of people takes for years.
Staying something in me, so it must to go immediately, but because it's staying for day, it means
That means you held it for a day until it got heavy. Next time you can let it go a half a day, and then you'll say, I can put it down now. And then later you can put it down in 6 hours. Okay.
So, but it's not staying. It's going. I'm not sure it's not. I'm not sure it's leaving my body. I think it's staying in my body.
Well, there are those residuals, which is even more reason to say, never mind, start again. I'm okay. Yeah, adrenaline is like that. That once somebody gets a lot of adrenaline in their body, it takes a while to get it back out. And when people want it to go away, they're actually creating more of it. So the right thing to do when you've got, in other words, getting angry or getting upset, full of tension, anxiety, or whatever like that, then the right thing to do when we recognize that anxiety and say, oh, I'm glad that I can see that anxiety. Let me just sit here and enjoy. And I can take a few deep breaths and settle down. I don't have to worry about where the anxiety came from. Right now, I can control it and let it seep away. But most people don't do that. When they're uptight, they stay uptight. They don't like being uptight, and so they keep themselves uptight by not liking being uptight. But when you become uptight and you can see it, you can say, oh, I'm really glad that I saw how anxious and uptight I was. I can take a deep breath and relax right now. And so there is that Upekkha in action right there in that moment. I screwed up. I'm full of anxiety and intention and whatever like that. Unstable deck, and I don't like it. If I don't like it, I'm burning out right then and there. But if I say, it's okay, that's all right. I've got anxiety. I can deal with it. I can breathe deeply, and I can let that adrenaline dissipate. Now, on a chemical level, if you're a chemist or that kind of scientist, then you know that adrenaline molecules are designed for energy. They've got everything packed together, which means that the molecule itself is going to break down shortly due to the components within the molecule itself. And adrenaline will break down into amino acids fairly quickly, and then the amino acids can be breathed out with the carbon dioxide. And so, in fact, we can, with deep breathing, come out of anxiety. It doesn't take very long. Maybe 10 or 15 seconds is all it takes to do it if we are mindful. But if we get back up tense and anxiety and I don't like it and whatnot, then you can perpetuate it for a long time. Then, in fact, many people have a residual anxiety that they don't even know about. They keep having unwholesome thoughts, and that causes unwholesome body chemistry, and they don't even know it. They don't even understand how uptight they are. But when we start practicing anapanasati, that means that we're paying attention to how we feel. We're paying close attention to the thoughts that we're having and how they affect our feelings, and we're aware of the feelings and how they affect the thoughts. And so this is all there really is to it. The Upekkha is to being able to handle the problems of life happily, because they're really not problems. It's just that I cared. And when we stop caring, then we stop carrying. And everything is easy. Everything is all right if we tell ourselves that. And everything is terrible if we tell ourselves that. So that's all there is to it. So the Brahma viharas, Mudita, Upekkha, Karuna, and Mudita all have to do with, can you have a positive, wholesome thought right now? That's all there is to it. Is, can you be wholesome right now? Are you friendly right now? Can you handle things right now?
Yeah.
And then over time, the habits change. Because the old habit was uptight. Now the new habits coming in is, everything's all right. I can set that stuff down. I'm still okay. Everything is fine. And then no burnout. So that's been the topic of our talk so far, is burnout. And the burnout is because we don't like what's happening. And yes, the medical profession is famous for the burnout. But it happens in professional football. It happens in academics. Professors get tired of those students eventually. It happens everywhere. It happens in every profession. But the medical profession has been wise enough to see it and label it as burnout. But most people, they They just don't have a clue about what's happening. And then they get fired or they quit their job in disgust, and they don't even recognize that would be burnout, that something was happening, they weren't satisfied with the job, and so they quit in disgust, or they got fired because other people could see that you weren't being effective anymore. And I would say offhand that the group that suffers from this the absolute most and yet don't do anything about it is the police force. That cops go around being miserable all the time because they're dealing with the worst levels of society all the time. They get burned out, they get disgusted, and then they just stay disgusted, and then they become angry, uptight, and vicious, and sometimes violent with people that are just on the street. It's because the cop is already burned out. He's not a human being anymore. He's a mechanical cop full of hatred, disgust, and anger. And so those kind of guys then will hire people that are for the propensity of that. And so it's perpetuated right out through the years in police forces, is because everybody is uptight, everybody is anxious, and everybody's burned out. And here they are. They're the ones who are walking around with the guns.
It's impossible to clear up.
One cop at a time.
Sit and meditate, even for 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm. One cop at a time. Then, in
Yeah.
fact, I have done this, to be honest with you. I don't know whether it was the right thing to do or not, but I had a cop who was interested in the Dhamma, and he asked that question. And my answer to that was, Dhamma is really hard when you're a cop. But the best thing to do if you're interested in Dhamma is go find a better job. Quit being a cop. Because being a cop means that you're being in the vicinity of violence through the workday. Violence is the capital. Violence is the reason for having cops, is you want to make sure that the government is more violent than any of the people in the government. So the government wants to hire people in the police force because they will be violent.
Yeah.
So the whole point about the police is that it's a mental corruption. A police force is a mental corruption. Why? Because if the people who wanted to have a police force felt safe and secure, in the United States, in fact, one of the major reasons why police forces happened in the South was to make sure that the white people could keep the black people in their place. That was the whole point of having the police. And that's still there. That's why the police are still violent. Even 100 years later, they're still violent, more with the blacks. Because that was the whole point of the police force in the first place, was to police the whites, to make them safe. And who cares? That police force was all white. Who cares about the blacks? In fact, in a way, you could say that the blacks were better off because they didn't have the police. But that's debatable, depending upon the perspective that you take. But your question about the police, the answer to that is the only way that you can have good police is by each individual cop, one at a time, seeing his burnout and quitting his job.
Okay, and no police then. They quit. Everybody quitting their job with no police. Yes.
Yeah,
So,
and then there's no policeman. Exactly.
terrible.
That's the only way to solve that problem, is one cop at a time quits his job.
And go to social work. Yeah.
A different kind of burnout. But I tell you what, we need, in that regard, we need a whole lot more social workers than we need cops. That they have been trying to solve social issues with cops, and cops are the social issue exonerated or elevated. And so we do need a whole lot more social workers and a whole lot less cops. But the people who are afraid and want the cops to protect them will say, oh no, we have to have a lot of cops because I feel afraid. Who are you afraid of? Oh, well, I'm afraid of anybody that's not like me. And I'm a white male living in southern United States, which means all black people, all Asians, all Hispanics, all Muslims, all of the people are different than I am. Therefore, they are dangerous. Now, that actually is a little way of saying the territorial instinct or tribalism, that we have a fear of the foreign because the foreign may be dangerous. And it's all based in ignorance. The wisdom would say, look at that Arab in his turban. I bet he's a good guy if I would only make friends with him. It doesn't matter how he's dressed. I can still make friends with him. Doesn't matter what kind of clothing he wears or the color of his skin or anything. He's human, and I can make friends with him. But that's not the attitude. The attitude is that all those foreign people, they're dangerous. The government has told us that they're dangerous. That's why they gave us a police force to protect us from all those dangerous people. And so those people, the ones who were afraid and therefore want the police, they're the ones who are perpetuating the violence. They want their police to be violent against those people, against the crooks, against the robbers, against the murderers, but not against me. But the cops see they no longer can tell that difference. And so the very people who want the cops around are the very people who have to deal with the cops and the cops' violence, because they are around. The society really would be a whole lot better if, in fact, every member of the police force, one at a time, would quit. And finally, even the police chief quits, because he just sits behind a desk. And even if the police chief doesn't quit, that's okay, because at least he's not out in the street hurting people. But the question is, how can we begin to have a society that is loving, kind, and friendly with one another? The answer to that is not by making a rule or changing structures or inventing a new device or anything. The answer is only one person at a time waking up. One person at a time waking up to see that they don't have to live violently, not even moment by moment, that they can live happily and in community with others.
It's possible for with individual one. You're saying one person at a time. It means individual work, or it can be group or system work. You can wake up.
Fix a system.
Huh?
We cannot fix a system, not from the top, not from the system. It can only change from the bottom, one individual at a time. That's the only way to change a system. So if you have a system that is like this, and then 10% of the people say, no, it's not like this, we can find a better way, then those 10% will influence the 90%, and the system will start to change. And then maybe 11% will see, and now it's only 89% of this messed up. So slowly over time, that an example would be that a high school teacher has listened to what I have to say and recognizing it, and then he takes that to the classroom, and now he's got 30 kids who will make changes in their life. And one or two of them may become a teacher, okay? And so the Dhamma can spread in the West in a very wholesome way. But the way that the Dhamma has spread in the West so far has been through ignorance and greed and ill will. How is the greed? Because they want money for it. How is the ill will? Oh, well, we're Theravada, and those people are Vajrayana. They don't know what they're doing. And then the Vajrayana say the same thing. Oh, well, they're Zen, and they don't know anything. Then, in fact, the entire teaching of the Buddha is to stop with these cultural differences between Tibet and Thailand and Japan. And the people in Japan, one Japanese guy can be friends with a Thai and friends with the Tibetan. And that's what the real teachings are. But in the West, we see differences. We say, oh, because Christianity is sectarian and they're all fighting with each other, the Buddhists should do that too. And the answer is that no, the Buddhists should learn to be able to cooperate with themselves, become friends with all of the other Buddhists, and then the Buddhism will have some real value for people.
Oh, that's ideal, right? So all Christianity trying to somehow to put themselves together as well with some
Everybody's trying to do
every
the same
system
thing, but
trying.
we
Every
have a
trying.
method. The Christians don't have a method. Jesus tried to teach them the method, but he failed. He only had 12 disciples, and those disciples, as he says in the Bible, they never figured out what Jesus was trying to tell them. Buddhism was different because of the social status that the Buddha was in was such that many people paid attention to him. He was an important dude right from the get-go. And so he was readily listened to where Jesus, he was a nobody, and the only people that he would attract were nobodies. But the Buddha, he attracted the very best. And because of that, Buddhism has remained actually pure enough that it's still successful. Christianity is an out and outright failure. Every priest and every preacher is subject to the same desires and wants as their congregation. To where within Buddhism, we have a set of monks who are basically able to clean out their minds and to help others to clean out their minds. And we've been doing that for 2,500 years. A small group, maybe 5 or 10%, but enough people to keep the real teachings alive, that all we have to do basically is to stop being enemies with ourselves and start being friends. And then we can stop being enemies with people outside and be friends with them too. That everybody makes a mistake.
So you're
But I
saying
make a
that
mistake too.
you're saying the Buddhists somehow have this vaccine from being special? I doubt, because we are
I'm
people.
not talking special. Special is an ordinary word that ordinary people use out of jealousy. No, awakened people are not special. Awakened people know that they're ordinary, that they're just like everybody else. That's why we can be friends, is because we see everybody as the same. Wanting to be special is part of the major ignorance that keeps the greed and the ill will going.
Okay, but Jesus wasn't like that's what it is. He was enlightened. So, but somehow.
Well, we don't know. We don't even know if the Jesus actually existed. All we know is the teachings of the Jesus that came in the Bible, and what the Jesus in the Bible taught is so much more enlightened than what Christianity has become that they're almost polar opposites.
But I doubt that official Buddhism is so enlightened. It's the same thing. It's because as a religion, it's becoming the same.
Yeah, humans. That's the whole point. Is it's also common because we're also human.
Yeah.
The question is, can we figure out that we can change? Because Christianity teaches, no, you can't change. You need a Jesus. And Jesus was saying you can change. There was a lot of stuff that he said that pointed out that people can change.
I'm reading now Torah, and it's very interesting. It's extremely opening, but at the same time, they're always saying they're special. It's kind of paradoxical book. Everything is right there, but they're saying non-stop they're special, and I don't understand how it can be together. So it is a paradox which always exists.
It is a paradox, isn't it? But the paradox is in language. All right. Right. Here's the paradox. The ordinary people, the mass number of people, all want to be special. And so they find special here, special there, everywhere. But someone who absolutely gets that and understands it correctly, he recognizes that he is in fact ordinary, just like everybody else who wants to be special, except that he no longer wants to be special. because he no longer wants to be special and is willing to be ordinary, that is what makes him special. That's a paradox in language.
In language or in life? Is it not? Is it the
Right.
being? It's not language. Okay, it's okay. This is just blah blah.
Yeah, just blah blah.
Okay.
But the point is that wanting to be special is wanting something, carrying it around. I wanting to be special. When you don't want to carry it around anymore, you put specialness down and say, "Oh, I'm okay. I'm ordinary." Gosh, how many meditation teachers are there in the world? And I'm just another one. I'm not special.
Yeah.
I'm not special at all. I'm having too much fun to be special. Special takes way too much work and the wrong kind of work.
Amen.
I would rather be ordinary, and that's special itself enough. So it's a paradox of language. It's kind of like a oxymoron. Ordinary specialness, or maybe special ordinary.
Yeah.
But the reality is that we have to make our minds wholesome. And that will solve all of our problems. Because when we're having wholesome thoughts, we're not having thoughts of problems. We don't have any problems when the mind is wholesome, when it's accepted the way that it is. And so we don't carry things around. We don't care anymore. They're not a problem anymore. Why should I care? Wow, this has been a long talk. I've really enjoyed this. I hope that you've gotten some value out of it, Anna.
Thank you. A lot. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Nothing much to it. But it's complicated because we like complications. So, Mudita, Karuna, Metta, Upekkha all have to do with how's your mind? Is your mind okay? Is it pure enough? Is it good enough? Or do you see your own mind as, I want something. I'm not good enough. I want special. And when we want things, then we're not satisfied. So becoming satisfied with the way things are, that's the trip. That's the easy way out. Just don't care anymore.
Yes, for the rest of the life, yes. Learn how not to care.
Okay, guys. Keyshawn, do you have anything left to say? No, he's
nothing for me, Dhammarato.
great
talk.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, you know that half this talk's been directed directly at you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I caught on.
Oh, you caught that, huh? All right. Excellent. Okay. Well, guys, we'll see you later. This has been a good talk.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
See you,
Okay.
Dhammarato.
All righty. Bye-bye.